Okay, great. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time this evening to hear our presentation. My name is Ben Turney. I'm the CEO of Kavango Resources. We are a metals exploration company with the base metal projects focused in the western half of Botswana. Our project areas cover three areas of what we believe are significant potential. In the northwest of the country, we're up in the Kalahari Copper Belt, which is the KCB, orange on the map in front of you. Down in the southwest is our flagship project, the KSZ, and slightly to the east is the Ditau Camp project. Now, this evening, I'm going to give a presentation about two of our lesser known projects, the Ditau project, which we're going to be drilling in the near future, and the LVR joint venture, which is in the eastern half of the Kalahari Copper Belt. So much of our attention last year was on the western half of the Copper Belt, our joint venture with Power Metal Resources, and of course our KSZ project, which is our flagship project, which we're currently drilling with the B1 conductor. But this evening I'm taking the opportunity to talk about the other areas of our portfolio that we're going to be putting much more attention to into this year as we process our results from our two other main areas. So up in front of you now is our disclaimer. I have to leave this up for a few seconds, just obviously give you an opportunity to read this. And then let's move on to Ditau. So Ditau is a very interesting project. It was one of the first areas that Kavango secured back in 2012, the eastern license that you can see on the map in front of you. Mike Moles and Hilary Gumbo, our co-founders, they originally were looking for base metals in this area. They thought it was prospective for that. But further to investigation by Kavango and exploration in the field, we've actually identified 12 ring structures, which you can see labelled on this map on the left-hand side, I1 through to I12. Now, ring structures are very interesting geologically because they can host what are called carbonatites, and carbonatites are the source of most of the world's rare earth elements. So rare earths are used primarily in modern technology, so particularly things like mobile phones and other high tech, with most of the world's supply coming from China. I think it's around about 90% comes from China. So rare earths are a highly sought after commodity in other areas of the planet. Now, what's very interesting about carbonatites is that they tend to appear in swarms. And as you can see on this map, we believe we've identified a swarm of exactly such targets. Now, Kavango drilled at Ditau back in 2019. The results from that were a bit inconclusive, but we think they did provide enough evidence, enough indicators to suggest that the carbonatite theory over I3, which is highlighted pretty much in the center of the project, but in the eastern license, the original license that we secured, provided enough evidence and enough indication that the carbonatite theory was one that certainly holds water and merited further follow-up. Now, obviously our exploration in Botswana was hampered somewhat by COVID over 2020 and 2021. And most of our focus over the last couple of years in the field has been both down in the Kalahari Suture Zone, where we're drilling at the moment, and up in the Copper Belt, where most of our field teams have been based. But now that we have a rig in the field that's suitable to drill Ditau, our plan is to move that rig down to this project area as soon as we finish the current drill campaign to go and drill 3 targets. Now, the work that we've done in the past, as with most of our other work, has been primarily geophysics-led. Botswana is a country, it's about the size of France, so it's a very big landmass, and about 70% of it is covered by Kalahari sands. Now, this is the real competitive edge for Kavango because those Kalahari sands obscure the regional geology from view. So that's severely limited historic exploration because obviously historic explorers, they couldn't see the geology outcropping to surface. So that meant that it wasn't really a viable exploration target when technology wasn't as advanced as it is today. So Hilary and Mike's original vision for Kavango was to develop a technology-led exploration company that would use remote sensing technology to penetrate through the sands to build quite sophisticated regional geophysical models, geophysical maps to identify drill targets, obviously with a view to making major discoveries. And their view was that because of this Kalahari cover, Botswana has a huge amount of potential to host major mineral deposits, not least because of its position on the western edge of the KAV craton. The KAV craton stretches across most of southern Africa and is one of the large tectonic plates. And where tectonic plates meet, you typically have a lot of volcanic activity, which can give rise to the right environment, the right conditions through ancient times to create modern major metal sulfide and mineral deposits. Now, in terms of our work program at Ditau, as you can see on this map, we have actually made quite a lot of progress. So we've done extensive magnetic surveys, both airborne and ground mag. We've also done we've used a technology called AMT. Now, AMT is really viewed as magic by many geophysicists. It's a technology that enables quite deep penetration into the Earth's crust, but also enables geophysicists to create what essentially amounts to a 3D view of an underlying target. And I'm about to show you some screenshots of one of our primary targets in this area that we're most excited about. As I mentioned, we drilled 2 holes back in 2019. The evidence from those certainly, it didn't lead to any commercial discovery, but it did provide us with some useful baseline data that we've been able to apply to help design our next drill campaign, which is going to be starting hopefully towards the end of February or in early March. Now, we're also going to be using a technology called time domain electromagnetic surveys. Now, this is a technology that we've used, we believe, with great success up in the KSZ, and we're now about to deploy using our strategic partner, Spectral Geophysics, down to the Ditau camp area to come and test some of these carbonatite targets to see their potential also for hosting high-speed conductors. Now, this hasn't been done in this area before. This is a very innovative technique that we're using, and it hasn't been applied in this way. So we don't know what the results will be. So it's a little bit of a shot in the dark. But if it's one that actually does lead to results, then obviously we've got a huge number of targets for us to work with, very large scale, and that really could help us unlock this area. Now, our main target, as I mentioned, we've got 12 of these ring structures, I1 through to I12. Our main short-term target is I10. Now, I10 is in the southwest of the license, down in this area here, and it's a very distinctive circular feature. We originally labelled I10 as a possible kimberlite. So in other words, we thought it might be a formation that could host diamonds. Now, for Kavango, that isn't so relevant because the way that prospecting licenses work in Botswana, there's the distinction between diamond prospecting and prospecting for metals. We've got the licenses to prospect for metals, and another company, a larger company, has the rights to prospect for diamonds. Now, we know from drill caps that we found above I10, so this is all in the public domain because these drill caps are available for anybody to see. We know from drill caps that we found that a company has recently drilled this I10 target, and we believe because this target was abandoned, that therefore rules out it being a kimberlite. Now, this is very interesting for us because it then begs the obvious question, well, what is this target? Now, we've done quite a bit of work historically on I10, and what you can see here, and you're about to see some on the next slide I'm going to show you, is some of our geophysical model for what we're actually looking at and why we're so excited about this target that we're planning to drill first in the campaign. The model itself has been created using ground mag and AMT surveys, and as you can see, we've also been able to constrain that model with local borehole data. So the 3 holes that you can see that are labelled on this map, these have given us very valuable information. So we're not just having to create a geophysical model based on assumptions, we've actually got some physical data that we can use that helped guide the creation of the model, and we hope therefore has enabled us to create a more accurate model, therefore giving us more confidence in what we're actually looking at. This is why I10 is such a high priority target for us. Now, our plan with the TDEM surveys is to lay 2 large loops over this area in this white rectangle box, and we're going to run the TDEM surveys over this in the near future with a view hopefully to identifying some conductors. The TDEM technology can penetrate down to about 700 meters, but from some of our interpretation of the magnetic and the AMT data, we actually think the targets are much closer to surface than that. We think we're looking at around about 300-meter target depth. So unlike in the KSZ where we're going for much deeper targets, the targets at Ditau really are much nearer to surface, and the Kalahari cover is also much thinner as well. This makes drilling in this area much less risky, but also it means that we're able to go and drill more targets because obviously we're not having to penetrate so deep into the ground. So the final borehole location is still to be confirmed, but our aim is to drill 2 holes into this target, as I say, in the very near future. So what you're looking at now is the model that's really got us quite excited. Now, this on the left is the 3D model. I mentioned earlier on how AMT can be viewed as magic by geophysicists and how it can enable models to be created that are in essence a 3D. What's very interesting about our model so far is that we believe it's a vertical oriented geophysical anomaly. Now, the reason that that could be significant is that a vertically oriented geophysical anomaly can have penetrated through a number of different sedimentary rock formations on its way to surface. So in other words, there are only very few things geologically that can create this kind of formation. Now, you can have things like thrusting and sort of intrusions that are sort of forced through tectonic activity. So, for example, earthquakes might cause sort of a body to move upwards vertically, or what's more likely is that what we're actually looking at is a magmatic intrusion. So in other words, however many hundreds of million years ago, magma made its way up through the surface, broke through a number of pre-existing rock layers and created what we hope is now a minerals deposit of some description. Now, the word dike is there are two types of magma formation. You have a sill, which is horizontal, so flat lying, that's where the magma spreads out, and a dike where the magma comes up vertically through to surface. And what we believe we're looking at here is one of these vertically intrusive bodies, which is both magnetic and is also giving off a very interesting resistivity reading from the data that we've gathered so far. This is why we're very keen to hit this area with TDEM, because what TDEM will help us find is hopefully a conductive body that will be potentially some form of metal sulfide, because obviously metal sulfide bodies are very highly conductive and give off very, very distinctive signatures. So what we have here, this is obviously a very technical screenshot. But where we're proposing, where we think we're going to drill our first hole, is where we have what's the coincidence, or the coincidence of both the magnetic high and also the gravity high. Now, this is an interesting area for us because you can see a clear peak in the gravity on this purple line here. And although this isn't the peak of the magnetic high, the fact that you do see a peak that coincides with this magnetic high, that gives us a very interesting exploration lead. Now, if we're able to find a conductive body that aligns with that as well, that really would become extremely exciting for us. And we're really looking forward to mobilising Kaz Lotter's team at Spectral down to this area so that we can complete that survey in the near future. In terms of the second hole that we plan to put over I-10, as I said earlier on, we're still making a final decision on this, but we're looking, we think, at about 300-metre target depth. In terms of the other two targets within Ditau, we've obviously got 11 ring structures for us to investigate. At the moment, we think we're going to drill one of the medium-sized targets and one of the large-sized targets. We're going to put 2 holes into each of those. We haven't finalised which of those targets yet we are going to investigate first, but the idea is a bit of proof of concept, but also with a view, hopefully, to discovering mineralisation. So this project is much more advanced than the KS, and we'll announce to the market as soon as we've made a final decision on drilling. So this brings us to my next slide and the copper belt. So up in the Kalahari copper belt, back up in the northwest of the country, we have a joint venture with a company called LVR Geo Explorers. Now, we have put announcements out about the LVR JV. You can see those on our announcement feed very clearly, but what we haven't produced so far, and we've been promising this for a long time, and I've got to put my own hands up here, I just simply haven't had the time to put this together yet. But what we've been promising is to put together some images to accompany announcements that are already out there in the public domain to show why we're so excited about the LVR JV. In many ways, this license 82 is actually our highest confidence license across the company's entire portfolio. So we've got about 15,000 square kilometres of ground across our project portfolio, but this license 082, this is the one where we think we've got the highest chance of making a metals discovery. Now, the reasons for this are mainly because both of the setting of this license, so it's sitting on a clear geological structural trend. So up to the northeast, you have the Plutus deposit and the Zeta deposit, both of which are known discoveries, part of Kuprick Canyon's portfolio. But it also sits on the other side of Guernsey Ridge and the Central Dome. And to the southeast, there's the Banana Zone project, the Banana Zone commercial discovery. So the positioning of this license was what originally attracted us to take this on and to take on the LVR JV, which we're currently accelerating our 90% ownership of. But it was then when we conducted airborne surveys over this is where the project really took a very, very exciting turn. Because what we found, and very helpfully, Kubrick Canyon have published on their website some of their geophysical data. We found from the geophysical data that we gathered from our airborne survey that where the PL082 was sitting in a very interesting analogous area to the Banana Zone discovery on the other side of Guernsey Ridge, we were delighted then to see within our airborne survey the clear similarities between the information that Kubrick Canyon has got on its website and our proprietary data that was gathered for us by SkyTem. And what we can see very, very clearly is here, this area of interest, key part of the feature, this sort of vertically dipping intensification, potentially of mineralization. We have to say potentially at this stage because we haven't drilled it. But what we do know from Kubrick Canyon and the Banana Zone discovery is that their geophysics is giving a very, very similar reading. And we know that this was a key part of the discovery that they made a few years ago, which is now obviously a commercial copper silver discovery. So we've still got some more work to do on this project. We're not quite ready to drill it just yet. It's certainly something we're planning in the near future. We're a small company at this stage, so we have fairly limited operational capacity, and our focus in the second half of last year was on the KSZ. But we're looking to mobilise up to the KCB with a different type of drill rig to the one that we've used down in the KSZ and that we're going to be using at Ditau next, to do quite an extensive drill campaign, both across the LVR JV and in particular this area, this target, but also the Kavango Resources joint venture with Power Metal Resources. And we have a number of very exciting targets that I've talked about in other presentations previously. And if you visit our website, you'll be able to find out more about those there. But in terms of this particular target, sometimes I find that with announcements that we put out, they're obviously quite technical. So actually reading the announcements, it can be quite difficult to understand the scale of the opportunity we're looking at. So the information I've provided tonight, this is all out there in the public domain, but this is the first time we've actually shown these images. But what's interesting for us is that we think we have over 8 kilometers of strike along this target in 082, associated with multiple folding and thrusting zones. Now, in the model that you have for the KCB, and I just jumped back and I should have mentioned this at the start, you have what's called the KCB is very much a sedimentary hosted copper environment. So in other words, you have layers of rock, these sedimentary rocks that built up over time with copper mineralization associated with silver getting trapped at various points. And then as tectonic activity occurred, and you have these sort of undulating subsurface features, which have basically been caused by movements within the Earth's surface, it creates these dome-like features. And what you see across the copper belt is within these zones on anticlines and what's called subclines, you see mineralization getting trapped essentially in pockets, and that's what we're really looking for within these projects. So the key areas are the Dakar formation, which isn't so prospective, but then underneath that is the contact point between the Dakar and the Naguaco Pan. So if we look on the Banana Zone discovery, the key areas where the major discoveries were made, this is the vertically dipping part of the discovery. This was the second part of one of the other parts of the discovery on the northern limb. We've got very, very similar feature, we believe, in our ground, where we've both got a northern limb and a southern limb, the southern limb giving off this very distinctive geophysical signature, which looks very, very similar to what we know as an existing proven commercial discovery. So we're very, very excited about this. We've got 8 kilometers of strike, so it is actually quite a large target in its own right. For any other company, this project probably would be the main one that they would be, shouting from the rooftops about. But I think it's a measure of the strength of Kavango's portfolio that it's now January 2022, and I'm finally showing these images today. But make no mistake, this really is a project that we are very, very optimistic about for drilling later this year. So I'll leave my contact details up on screen. I'm available anytime. I regularly post on Twitter. My DMs are open. Feel free to email me. Happy to field any shareholder questions. What I would ask this evening is please don't ask us anything about the drill. As we know, we're at a very key stage at this particular point. So this evening, if we could just keep questions to anything other than the drill, I'd be most grateful.
Okay, we'll press on with a few questions for you in the time we've got allowed. So, where do you see the biggest risks and how are you addressing them?
Across our portfolio? Well, the biggest risk is obviously The biggest risk is always drilling. Drilling is very complex. The deeper you have to go, the riskier it becomes. And of course, the drill bit is the truth detector. So we do everything we can to give ourselves as much confidence before we actually commit to drilling. That does require some patience. So if you look at the development of Kavango over the last couple of years, we put a huge amount of effort into our geophysical modelling, our surface work as well, to try and get as clear an understanding of what's actually happening at depth before we actually go and put that drill bit in the ground. Then in terms of actual drilling operations themselves, we've partnered with a company called Mindea, which is co-owned, is partially owned by another firm called Equity Drilling. These guys are some of the best people around for conducting this type of drilling. So the people that we've teamed up with a huge amount of confidence in. They practice, all over they operate, I should say, all over the continent, and are well known for taking on complex technical engineering challenges. And that's reflected in the success that we've had in the campaign so far. So it's a case both of de-risking the targets before we actually put the drill in the ground, and then using the best possible operator, the safest operator we can, to give ourselves maximum chance of hitting target depth.
Okay, so with all the projects and obviously the capex being spent across various different options, what is the best case scenario in the coming months?
Best in terms of share price movement, is that?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's difficult for me to say. I mean, if this B1 conductor turns out to be what we think it could be, then we're going to be a rocket. We're going to be on a rocket ship to the moon. Sorry, I don't want to sound exaggerated on this, but we never know. I mean, look, Mother Nature can be cruel. We've done everything we can on this particular target we're about to drill. But in terms of sort of next steps, we've got this campaign lined up at Ditau. We're very excited about that. We've got the 6 holes we'll be drilling. If it turns out that we have identified ring structures and that those do look like they're prospective rare earth elements, that could be a hugely significant event for the company. And of course, up in the copper belt. Now, the great thing about the copper belt is that the exploration model up there is tried and tested. So where in the KSZ and in Ditau we're breaking new ground because we're trying to unlock new frontiers, up in the copper belt, all the hard work's already been done for us by previous operators. So there's pretty much a playbook that we have to follow with much shallower targets. And again, because they're much shallower, they require a different type of drilling that's also much cheaper. We can cover a lot more ground a lot more quickly. So with our current capex of about £1.7 million, I think it's actually sort of 1.6 today, we've got plenty of funding to see us through the next stage of our work program with lots of catalysts, both for news but also potential discoveries.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Will you be looking to raise any equity during 2022, or you just said you're quite happy where you are at the moment?
Well, again, I mean, it's a question a lot of companies like to duck. At some point in 2022, I imagine we will. That's just an honest answer. We've got a huge amount of ground to cover. With the budget that we have in place, we're obviously looking to make discoveries. But obviously, at the same time, we're in a position now with the changes that we've made with the business where we will look to scale up. In terms of, I realise this is all part of the dance that the market likes to lead, trying to guess when a placing might come and when is the optimal time to buy. For our current work program, which, as I say, has got a number of crucial catalysts, we're fully funded through that. In terms of what might happen later on in the year, I expect at some point later on this year we will come to raise. But then that doesn't presuppose that we end up managing to secure a joint venture. I mean, if we do secure a major joint venture, like I said, then I mean, who knows what might happen? But at some point, I would imagine we probably will. Yes.
Okay. The question here, in a previous presentation, Ben, you mentioned plans on getting a second rig. It has been known for long enough Another rig, sorry, for KCB is planned. Are you planning on adding more now with the Ditau, KSZ and KCB projects?
Yeah, so I touched on this in the presentation.
Yeah.
So the drilling requirements up in the KCB are different to those down in the KSZ and the Ditau. So we're using the same rig for those 2 projects. We do need a different type of rig, what's called a multi-purpose rig, that can do both diamond drilling and RA and rad drilling for us up in the KCB. So that will enable us to get drill cores where we need them for understanding the geology and the stratigraphy, but will also provide us with a much cheaper form of drilling for us to burn through some meters because we're looking at much shallower targets. So So we're looking at a multi-purpose rig for up in the KCB. But again, it has been known about for quite a long time. We haven't pulled the trigger on it just yet because our focus has been on the KSZ, and now we're moving to Ditau, but it's very much on our agenda in the not too distant future.